The passion trap. How a word became a cage. Follow your passion. It is perhaps the most successfully distributed piece of advice in the modern era. It appears in graduation speeches, self-help books, career counseling sessions, motivational posters, and the origin stories of every billionaire who ever gave a TED Talk. It feels like liberation. It is engineered extraction. Before anything else, the word itself must be dissected because the entire mechanism runs on its ambiguity remaining intact. What passion actually is. Passion derives from the Latin passio, suffering, endurance, being acted upon. The passion of Christ is not Christ enthusiastically pursuing his calling. It is Christ being subjected to forces beyond his control. The original word describes a state of being driven, compelled, overwhelmed by something external to rational agency. This is not accidental etymology. It is a precise description of what the emotional state actually is, functionally. Passion is not a chosen direction. It is an intense emotional response to a stimulus. Art, music, engineering, whatever the particular flavor happens to be. It feels like it comes from inside because the emotional response is genuinely yours. But the stimulus, the context, the available channels through which that intensity can flow, those are entirely externally structured. You didn't choose what moves you in a vacuum. You were born into a specific cultural environment that presented specific objects of intensity at specific developmental moments when your nervous system was most receptive to imprinting. The passion feels sovereign. The conditions that produced it were never yours. The extraction mechanism. Now observe what follow your passion actually instructs you to do structurally. It tells you to take the most intense, personal, emotionally loaded part of your inner life. The thing that moves you most deeply, that connects to your identity most fundamentally, and insert it directly into the market as a productivity mechanism. The genius of this instruction is its completeness as an extraction tool. Ordinary labor creates a separation between the worker and the work. You perform the function, you receive the wage, you go home. The alienation is real, but it creates a boundary. There is a self that exists outside the work. There is an interior life the market hasn't fully colonized. Follow your passion eliminates that boundary entirely. Now your deepest emotional investments, your most personal creative expressions, your most intimate experiences of meaning, all of it gets restructured as a value generation engine for capital. The musician who followed their passion is now producing content for a streaming platform that captures 70% of the revenue. The artist who followed their passion is now generating visual assets for a brand. The engineer who followed their passion is now optimizing engagement metrics for an advertising system. And here is the most vicious part of the mechanism. When the passion gets crushed under deadlines, metrics, market demands, and the grinding reality of survival economics, the individual is left with nowhere to turn. They didn't just lose a job, they lost the thing that made them feel most alive. The extraction didn't just take their labor, it took the meaning they attached to that labor and monetized it until it became indistinguishable from any other form of managed survival. The passion became the cage precisely because it was the most personal thing available to put bars around. Entrepreneurship, self-sabotage in a commodified survival landscape. If follow your passion is the basic extraction mechanism, entrepreneurship is its premium version. And in a world where survival itself is commodified, where water, shelter, food, healthcare, and basic dignified existence all sit behind payment walls you were never consulted about, entrepreneurship is not a path to freedom. It is self-sabotage, dressed as sovereignty. Here is the observable reality of what entrepreneurship actually means when survival is already commodified. You begin the venture already bleeding. Rent still due. Food still requires money. Healthcare still a financial event, not a human right. The clock on basic biological survival is running from day one, regardless of whether the venture generates revenue. You are not building from a position of stability, with room to experiment and fail intelligently. You are building while drowning, which means every decision is contaminated by survival panic rather than strategic clarity. This is not a motivational obstacle to overcome. It is a structural condition that systematically destroys the quality of decision-making required to build anything genuinely durable. The cognitive load of financial precarity consumes bandwidth that should be going into the work. This is not speculation. It is observable in the behavior of anyone trying to build something real while simultaneously managing the anxiety of imminent survival failure. But the commodified survival problem is only the entry wound. The system has deeper mechanisms waiting. Capitalism's ugliest face. Not merit, but the machinery of destruction. The mythology of capitalism presents itself as a meritocracy. Good ideas win, hard work compounds, genuine value gets rewarded. This narrative is not just false, it is an inversion of the observable mechanics of how the system actually operates against anyone who genuinely threatens established capital positions. The ugliest face of capitalism is not competition. It is not even exploitation in the straightforward sense. It is the apparatus of regulatory capture, legal harassment, and institutional blackmail deployed systematically against genuine challengers to established power. Consider the observable pattern. A genuine idea emerges, one that actually threatens an existing market position held by established capital. What follows is not market competition on merit. What follows is a coordinated multi-front campaign of destruction that has nothing to do with the quality of the idea. Regulatory capture first. Established players have spent decades and billions ensuring that regulatory frameworks are written specifically to favor their operational models and create compliance costs that are trivial for large capital but existential for small challengers. The regulation doesn't announce itself as protectionism. It announces itself as consumer protection, safety standards, environmental compliance, financial regulation. The language is always virtuous. The function is always the same. Raise the floor of operational cost high enough that only existing capital can afford to stand on it. Legal harassment second, patent litigation, trademark disputes, tortious interference claims, non-compete enforcement. The legal system is an extraordinarily effective weapon when wielded by a party with unlimited legal resources against a party spending those same resources on survival. The merits of the legal claim are almost irrelevant. The goal is cost and distraction. A small operation defending against even a completely frivolous lawsuit is consuming resources, management attention, and psychological energy that should be building the venture. The established player files, waits, and watches the challenger slowly drain. Blackmail in its structural form. Third, access to distribution, to platforms, to supply chains, to financing, all controlled by established capital, and all available on terms that can be modified the moment a challenger becomes threatening. The small producer who built a business on a platform discovers the platform's algorithm changed and their visibility evaporated overnight. The challenger who secured distribution through an established network discovers the terms renegotiated in ways that eliminate their margin. These are not market forces. They are deliberate leverage applications by parties with the power to grant or deny access to the infrastructure of commercial existence. The system is total. It does not need to defeat every challenger on every front simultaneously. It only needs to make the cost of persisting higher than the resources available to persist. Dry out the challenger financially, legally, psychologically, and the idea dies regardless of its genuine merit. The graveyard of suppressed genuinely good ideas is not a conspiracy theory. It is the observable output of a system whose primary function is the protection of existing capital positions, not the reward of genuine value creation. You might have the idea, you might have the capability, you might have the work ethic, the clarity, the genuine innovation. None of it matters if the system decides you are threatening enough to destroy, because the system has tools for destruction that have nothing to do with merit and everything to do with the structural power differential between established capital and anyone attempting to challenge it from below. Entrepreneurship under these conditions is not self-determination. It is volunteering to enter the destruction apparatus with your most personal investments attached. It is self-sabotage with extra steps and motivational language applied on top. There is no passion. There is only alignment. Strip everything away and derive from first principles. The human organism exists in a specific condition. That condition has observable parameters, biological needs, social requirements, cognitive architecture, developmental history, the specific material circumstances of survival in the present moment. This is the human condition not as philosophy, but as observable fact. You are a specific organism in a specific situation with specific actual needs and specific actual constraints. Passion, as conventionally defined, floats above this condition. It pretends the intense emotional response exists independently of material reality and can serve as a compass, regardless of circumstances. Follow it, and the circumstances will arrange themselves. This is magical thinking dressed in motivational language that serves the extraction mechanism perfectly, because a person chasing passion is a person who hasn't mapped their actual condition honestly and is therefore navigating blind directly into the apparatus. Alignment is something entirely different and entirely grounded. Alignment begins with mapping the actual condition honestly, not the condition you wish you were in, not the condition the entrepreneurship narrative tells you that you could reach if you hustled hard enough. The actual present observable condition, your precarity named clearly, your real constraints identified, your genuine resources assessed, your actual skills evaluated without ego inflation or false modesty, the real power structures you are operating within understood precisely, the honest assessment of what is actually available to you given what is true right now. From that honest map you derive what directions are genuinely available, not what directions feel most emotionally intense, not what directions the market has declared most monetizable, what directions are available to a person in your actual condition, moving toward outcomes that address your actual needs and your actual nature simultaneously. This is alignment. It is not comfortable. It requires confronting the precarity directly rather than spiritually bypassing it with passion language. It requires dismantling the delusions, not cruelly, but precisely, because a map with fantasy geography navigates you into walls, regardless of how sincerely you believe the map. The only way through the system is total, but it is not omnipotent. It has one fundamental vulnerability. It requires your participation, your consumption, your belief in its narrative frame to reproduce itself through you. Withdraw those and the apparatus loses its purchase. This is not a call to dramatic revolutionary action. It is a call to something far more threatening to the system. Precise, quiet, structural disengagement combined with deliberate alternative construction. Map the system first. Not emotionally, not ideologically in the performed sense, but precisely. Understand the narrative frames being deployed around you. The passion myth, the entrepreneurship myth, the meritocracy myth, the consumer identity myth. Name them accurately. Understand their function. Understand who benefits from your believing them and what you lose by believing them. A person who can see the frame cannot be contained by it in the same way. The map is the first act of genuine resistance because it restores the epistemic sovereignty the system requires you to surrender. Refuse consumer culture absolutely, not partially, not selectively, not as aesthetic preference. Consumer culture is the system's primary mechanism for converting your labor back into its own reproduction. You work to earn money, to spend on products that generate the profits that fund the system, that structures your need to work. The loop is total and self-reinforcing. Every unnecessary consumption is participation in your own extraction. Absolute minimalism is not asceticism for its own sake. It is the severing of the consumption loop at the individual level. Reduce your survival cost to its genuine minimum, and you simultaneously reduce your dependence on the system's wage structures and your contribution to its reproduction. This is the most concrete individual act of structural resistance available. Connect with people and help them map their lives, not to build a following, not to monetize the connection, because the isolation the system produces is not accidental. Atomized individuals cannot organize, cannot support each other through the precarity, cannot build alternatives. Every genuine human connection that operates outside the consumption framework is a small reconstruction of the social fabric the system requires to remain torn. Help people see their actual condition clearly. Help them name their precarity without shame. Help them identify their delusions not to humiliate but to liberate. Because you cannot navigate accurately from a false map, regardless of how hard you try. Build genuine rigid community on alignment, not emotion or fantasy. This is the complete departure from how community is conventionally understood, and it is the most critical structural element of any durable alternative. Emotional community feels good and dissolves under pressure. It is built on shared feeling, shared aesthetic, shared identity performance. When the feeling changes, when the aesthetic shifts, when the identity performance becomes costly, the community dissolves because the foundation was never load-bearing. Fantasy community is built on shared narrative about what will be, the revolution that's coming, the success that's imminent, the transformation that's around the corner. When the fantasy fails contact with reality, and it always does, the community fragments into recrimination and disillusionment. Alignment-based community is built on something entirely different. Shared, honest assessment of actual condition, shared, derived understanding of the system being navigated, shared commitment to specific observable, mutual support functions, and shared standards of epistemic honesty that make the community self-correcting rather than self-deceiving. This community does not require everyone to feel the same way. It does not require shared passion or shared aesthetic or shared identity. It requires shared commitment to seeing clearly and acting from that clarity in ways that serve the collective condition honestly. It is rigid not because it is dogmatic, but because its foundation is observable reality, rather than feeling or narrative. You cannot argue someone out of a community whose foundation is what they can directly observe. You can argue someone out of a feeling. You cannot argue them out of a map that accurately describes the territory they are standing in. This community is small by nature. It cannot be built fast, and it cannot be built from unforged individuals, but it is durable in ways that no emotionally or fantasy-built community has ever been, because it was never dependent on the conditions that the system can manipulate. The complete picture. The meaning of life is not passion. Passion is a word the system handed you to point your most personal energies toward its own reproduction while feeling like sovereign self-expression. The path through is not entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is the system's invitation to self-extract, using your own most personal investments as fuel, while the apparatus of regulation, legal harassment, and structural blackmail waits patiently to destroy anything that genuinely threatens established positions. The path through begins with the map. Honest, precise, unflinching, your actual precarity named clearly, your actual delusions identified and dismantled, your actual condition observed directly without the comfort of the narrative frames the system distributes to keep you navigating blind. From the honest map comes alignment. From alignment comes genuine connection. From genuine connection comes community built on something the system cannot purchase, cannot regulate, cannot legally harass, and cannot dry out, because it is not playing the system's game on the system's terms. It runs on clarity, it runs on mutual honest support, it runs on absolute minimalism that severs the consumption loop. It runs on people who have done the work of seeing their actual condition and have chosen to navigate from that clarity together rather than alone. That is not a graduation speech. It will never be a motivational poster, but it is the only map that points at something real.